Welcome. In today's episode, I would like to speak about a rather disturbing occurrence. It's a plant. I bet you never heard about it. It's the spaghetti tree. You never heard about it because it doesn't exist. But this didn't hold BBC from running a documentary on it. It was 1957, and BBC just decided to take an April's Fool on its audience and filmed this brief documentary. It was filmed in Switzerland, where you can see people harvesting these spaghettis from the plants. And they just cut branches, and they people just got interviewed and spoke about cultivation of this tree and harvest techniques and so forth. You have to think about the fact that in the late 50s, spaghettis were a rather exotic food for England, was post-war England, and people just knew them from the tin can, where spaghettis were in tomato sauce, and so it was plausible that they were actually fruits growing on plants or trees, and people could harvest them. So in the next days from the broadcasting of this documentary, BBC was swamped by a huge wave of requests about how to plant this tree. Everybody wanted that spaghetti trees in his garden, and they wanted to know how to plant it, how where they can find seeds or plants. Who knows how it grows? Maybe you have to grow it in a tree house in a greenhouse before, and was not clear, and redaction from BBC answered with irony, telling people just they could try to plant some empty cans and see what grows, or they were very explicit about the fact that it was an April's Fool and was just a joke, and just to take it like it what it was, a funny occurrence. But the fact is, just think about for a moment what could happen if the redaction of BBC, the public stuff, wouldn't have responded like this. If they decided to run a series of documentary about spaghetti trees, how they grow, to show how seeds are, how they look, and how they do, and it's plausible that a whole business about people selling seeds, selling manuals, how to grow spaghetti trees, and so forth could have been born about this hoax. It's very plausible. I can imagine a lot of people spending their money or on these magic seeds. So if we think about it, that's a very unknown fact about this spaghetti tree. But everybody, or almost everybody, know about the occurrence of the War of Worlds. It's more famous. It's about this radio program happened in was broadcast in the late 30s. I think it was 1938, where Orson Welles just broadcasting this program where he spoke. He read. It was not a reading. It was based of a novel of the same name, of the same title, the War of the Worlds, where he told the story of aliens conquering the Earth. So they just came on our planet and attacked it, and people were deceived. People thought it was true, and panic occurred on the street. People on the street just going crazy about this thing, asking themselves where these aliens were and so on. Now, modern historiography, have a little bit downplayed this this occurrence. They think that this panic wave was not so big as it was painted and so on, but still, usually this occurrence is downplaying, downplayed, saying that people were very naive at the time. It's the end of the 30s, and they were not accustomed to radio. It was rather new media and so on. So it's just a way to say, well, we will not be so stupid if it happened now. But with this other occurrence about the spaghetti tree, it's already more, to me at least, it's more difficult to downplay it because it's already almost 20 years later. People are more accustomed to medias, and still millions of people believed it, just believed it. And so I would like to ask what are the processes which make that we believe this. We can easily be fooled by such a form of manipulation. In this case, it was a good, good form of manipulation since it was just a joke and intended to be a joke. But what about manipulation that we don't notice and we are just pushed by it on buying stuff or behaving in a certain way, and in extreme case to do really, really evil stuff? So analyzing, or to help us analyzing what are the processes that bring us to fall for manipulation, we should ask the king of manipulation, which is Goebbels, the minister of propaganda in the Nazi regime. And he has two principles which applies particularly to this case of spaghetti trees. First of which is the principle of the big lie, the große Lüge. The big lie is a principle that says that if the lie is big enough, nobody will question it because it's too big. You cannot you cannot deny it. It's simply too big. Nobody would say a lie which is so big. It's impossible. It's impossible. It's no. You don't believe it. It's too big. It's, it implies that a lot of people believe in something that is full. So this cannot be possible. And it is very interesting to note that this principle was not invented by Goebbels, but first of all was announced by Hitler himself. And it's very, very curious and interesting that Hitler didn't saw himself as a manipulator. So he didn't told about this, about the große Lüge, the big lie, telling, yeah, that's a tool I will use to fool the masses and, yeah, be submitted to my evil regime. But on the contrary, Hitler saw himself as a victim of a big lie, which is the lie that the First World War was lost by Germany. I mean, so Hitler meant that Germany didn't lost the First War, but was a fact of treason. So there were traitors inside Germany, which are, we know, to whom he was thinking: Jews, primarily, Bolsheviks, Masons, Freemasons, and so on. We don't we don't have to dwell about this myth, but he really saw himself as a victim of this big lie. So he was a soldier. We know he was a soldier in the First World War, as many soldiers and many civilians too. He thought that he was a victim of a big lie from these traitors. It was an inside job from these traitors, the armistice, so the peace treaty, very humiliating one, that was signed by Germany. So it was not fault, the soldiers' fault, the army's fault, or the civilians' fault, but it was traitors' fault. And he was a victim. He and the German people was a victim of a big lie. And that's very interesting because this, you have to think he didn't invented this myth about the lost victory. Just call it about this. You have to think about the fact that Germany and Austro-Hungarian Empire, the two allies, they suffered famine during the First World War, especially the last 2 years, because of the naval blockade from allies, and which means that people really suffered a lot. They starved to death. We speak about millions of people. So you have to think about these people in front of new of defeat. They couldn't accept it because this means that I was starving. My children were starving for nothing. For nothing. People couldn't accept it, so they just search for a hidden reason, for a hidden culprit. And this obviously doesn't justify the myth, but it explains how it is born, this myth. And so it's very interesting that Hitler took this myth and he thought himself as a victim, and he thought he was the debunker. He thought he was bringing again truth. He was just destroying the lies and bringing on truth. He was debunking the big lies. That's very interesting. He didn't saw himself as a manipulator. He saw himself as a truth bringer. Very interesting. And the second principle, which is maybe more known, I think it's very well known, is a principle of repetition. So if you repeat a lie long enough, it will become a truth. It's very interesting that this principle was proven more and more time by different universities, which just showed that people are more inclined to believe something that is from them normal or usual, or they encounter it, this information in day-to-day life, even if it's false, even if it's a lie, they tend to believe it. And on the contrary, they tend to disbelieve something new, which is unusual, but it's true. And we can see in everyday life that people just, one big criterion for truth is that's not normal, that's weird. Everybody, we it's our brain that works like this way. The problem is that this makes us very prone to manipulation. So the point of this video and of is not telling you how to grow your spaghetti tree, but to give you some suggestion to ask yourself in which point you are probably in this very moment manipulated in believing something bluntly false, but you are just inclined to believe it, and you just do things and believe things just because you believe this lie would be too big, so must be true, or this is simply too unusual and better to believe what is normally heard by people or by mainstream media. So I will just let you with this kind kind of little grain of reflection, and to the next time.